And we know for a fact that dozens of Palestinians have been killed in Israeli captivity over the past several months since October 7th to this day. And if you were to imagine a scenario right now in which Hamas conducts an operation, kills several hundred Israelis, and then rescues 4 Palestinians from Israeli detention, would anybody even know the names of those 4 Palestinians who have been rescued? Or would the entire world and our discourse be condemning the massacre that had taken place? Would that be what's dominating the headlines? We know the answer to that, and we know that we would not be reducing the massacre to nothing had it been the other way around. So yes, maybe Jake Sullivan can talk about how tragic it is that people are dying, but when push comes to shove, the United States is providing the military funding that is allowing for these casualties to occur on a regular basis. At this point, every major human rights organization in the world is describing Israeli conduct in Gaza as war crimes. They are describing the deliberate starving of children. Several of them have died of starvation as well. We are witnessing that the International Court of Justice has found that Israel is plausibly committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. And in light of all this, for the Biden administration to continue providing unlimited and unconditional military funding for Israel to carry on this genocidal slaughter in Gaza while expressing regret at the fact that some civilians are dying in the process, I mean, just who are they fooling? They are responsible for it in a direct way. If they do find it tragic, there's a very, very easy solution to it, and that is to put an end to U.S. military funding for Israel until Israel starts abiding by international law and stops this indiscriminate onslaught on the civilian population in Gaza.
I want to go to President Biden during a joint press conference with the French President Macron on Saturday.
But before I begin my remarks, I want to echo President Macron's comments welcoming the safe rescue of 4 hostages that were returned to their families in Israel. We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential to happen.
So what about this ceasefire? What about this deal? What about Israel and Hamas? The U.S. focuses on Hamas, whether they will accept the deal. President Biden introduced it as an Israeli deal, and yet Netanyahu has not approved this deal.
Amy, I think it's really important for your audience to actually understand a bit of the merits of that ceasefire proposal. There has long been tension between the Israeli position, which is effectively a temporary ceasefire, a return of all the hostages to Israel, and then a continuation of the war, of this onslaught on Gaza that has so far killed nearly 40,000 people and just destroyed the overwhelming majority of the Gaza Strip. And the Hamas position, on the other hand, they're saying they're willing to give up the hostages, but they need an end to this onslaught. They want a permanent ceasefire. And the proposal that Biden put forward effectively presents 2 phases. Phase 1 is a temporary ceasefire, and phase 2 is the permanent one. And in between, he's left it vague about what needs to be negotiated in order to get to the permanent ceasefire bit. And Netanyahu, I mean, both sides are suspicious for different reasons, right? Hamas is suspicious of that kind of deal because they're afraid they're going to be forced to give up nearly all the hostages at phase 1, and then the war is simply going to continue. And from Netanyahu's perspective, he's worried that when the war is halted in that temporary ceasefire, that the U.S. is going to apply significant pressure on Netanyahu to turn it into a permanent ceasefire. Now, Netanyahu immediately came out and effectively rejected any idea that the Biden plan is going to end the war because he said all Israel has offered is a plan that allows us to continue this war until Hamas is completely destroyed. So he's effectively openly rejected that deal. And the Biden administration, as it always does, then turns around and applies all the pressure that they want to on the Palestinian side. Now they're trying to pressure Qatar into potentially throwing out the Hamas leadership out of Qatar if they don't accept that deal. So time and again, we see this pattern where when push comes to shove, the Biden administration is unwilling to apply any meaningful pressure on Israel. They threatened it here and there. They talk about potentially withholding some weapons. And the second there's any bit of criticism of the Biden administration from right-wing politicians and frankly some establishment mainstream ones about how Biden is not backing Israel sufficiently, Biden immediately panics and just throws another unlimited supply of weapons in Israel and says that Israel can do whatever it wants. That dynamic is not going to lead to anything positive. We can't get an end to this onslaught if Biden is afraid to apply meaningful pressure on Netanyahu or on Israel. That has long been the core of the issue. By the way, not just in reference to this particular ceasefire effort, but it really is about the broader dynamic of Israel and the United States, where the impunity that Israel enjoys to continue this occupation, to entrench the occupation in the West Bank and in Gaza, And the fact that Biden has always offered unconditional diplomatic support and unconditional military support, that allows extremism to fester within the Israeli government. And that's what pushes their policies in a more and more extreme direction, where there is no possibility right now for a genuine, long-lasting, just peace, because the Israeli government rejects that completely out of hand. And the only thing that can change that is a shift in American approach, and to start saying that America will not be complicit in these kinds of atrocities, will not be complicit in entrenching apartheid and occupation, because that is not a recipe for a stable region or for any kind of long-lasting peace or justice.
Omar Badada, we want to thank you so much for being with us, Palestinian-American political analyst, member of the National Policy Council of the Arab American Institute.
Losing my parents, that the only way to bring the hostages back is by a deal. All hostages in exchange for all Palestinian prisoners. 8 months has passed, and we lost so many lives. So many lives of the hostages, so many Palestinian lives, and there is no meaning. There is no meaning and no excuse or justification for the suffering, for the pain, for the agony we are facing and living through. And what I'm afraid and what I'm crying for is that it might be only the beginning. It might be only the beginning, and we might face the numbers we already forgot from Rwanda. 1 million people were were killed in a period of 3 months in Rwanda. And it took them, the world, 3 months to wake up and to act. And I cannot understand what will make the world to act. Only a number of million victims between the river and the sea. I already lost my parents. And I don't want no one, no human being to be in the position I am. And we must stop it, and we must start a new phase in humanity, that we are not solving conflicts through war, through bloodshed, through revenge, but we resolve conflicts through dialogue, through envisioning a better future, deciding and agreeing on the values of the future, our common ground as humans. We all deserve better. We all deserve better, and we must make the future better than what we've been going through now.
So, Maoz, can you tell us about what's happening across the country, across Israel? You have these mass protests over the weekend before and after the hostages were released. Thousands of Israelis calling for Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire. They're hit by water cannons. There were over 30 arrested. Can you talk about what this movement is about? And also, Benny Gantz quitting the war cabinet. What meaning does this have?
Okay. I'm not a political analyst. I'm a peace activist. I lost my parents. And I believe that peace is possible. I know that peace is possible. And this is what me and my partners, Palestinian Israeli partners, are working on now, day and night, to bring peace to this land. But I would start by differentiating between the Israeli government and the Israeli people. The Israeli government has been working now for decades into achieving one goal, is a Jewish/Israeli supremacy between the river and the sea, through settlements, through occupation, through oppressioning the Palestinian people within Israel and in the West Bank in Gaza. And while this is what the government wants to do and acting on to execute it, the Israeli people want security and safety. The Israeli people are traumatized. I traumatized from October 7th, and I can take it back in history. The Israeli people are still traumatized from the Holocaust. It's an ongoing trauma that we are facing again and again. And we must cure the Israeli people. And at the same time, of course, we must cure and take in accountability the Palestinian people, because there will be no security and safety to one without the other. So how can we cure? How can we cure our people? And this is what on stake. And while the protests or guns, again, they are calling for a deal. The people on the street are calling for a deal because more and more Israelis do understand that the safest and most humanitarian way to release the hostages without risking no one's, Israelis and Palestinians alike, is through a deal. But it's against the interest of the government. Because if, like your reporters' analysis said before, because if the hostages will be back home, then the government will need to deal with the day after. And they don't care about the day after. They want the day after to look like the present. They want the bloodshed, the revenge, the war and the fear to continue because it serves them in their greater mission, the greater mission of Jewish-Israeli supremacy between the river and the sea. And this is why the world must act. The world cannot wait. It's time not for talks or for speeches. It's time for action to stop the war immediately, to make a deal, all hostages in exchange for all Palestinian prisoners, and start working to build a better future. We must envision a peaceful future between the river and the sea, and building a roadmap to make it happen. So, because our leaders are not doing it, because of lack of leadership, and Gantz is just an example of a politician that has no political imagination. He believes only in force, in military response to whatever circumstance or situation it is. But this is not what we need here. We need a political imagination to envision a better future, a diplomatic solution, like Israel knew how to do in the past with Jordan and with Egypt. And those are the only borders where we have security and safety.
We've been speaking with Maoz Inam.